What happens when a millionaire CEO, known for his power and cold heart, walks past a park bench and finds a little girl crying alone? She's only 5 years old, dressed in pink, holding a broken teddy bear, and completely ignored by everyone around her. But instead of turning away, he kneels down beside her. And in that moment, both of their lives change forever. This is a heart-melting story of compassion, hope, and the lesson that no child should ever be invisible. The sun was high, pouring golden light across the glass walls of Victor's office tower. The streets buzzed with traffic, car horns, and the chatter of people rushing to lunch breaks. Victor stepped out of the tall building, his sky-blue suit sharp and commanding against the bright city backdrop. He adjusted his tie, his face calm, his stride purposeful. At 35, Victor was the kind of man people noticed instantly, powerful, wealthy, and untouchable. Every move he made was precise, every step calculated. But then he stopped. Something unusual caught his eye. On a stone bench near the busy sidewalk sat a small figure, a child, a little girl. She looked no more than 5 years old. Her blonde hair was tangled, shining unevenly under the sunlight. Her pale pink dress was wrinkled, dirt smudged on the hem as if she had been sitting there far too long. In her lap rested a teddy bear, worn thin, one button eye missing. Tears streaked her cheeks, glittering in the daylight. Her small hands rubbed at her eyes, leaving faint red marks on her delicate skin. Every few seconds she sniffled, trying to quiet her sobs so strangers wouldn't hear. But the sound carried anyway. And while dozens of people passed by, well-dressed businessmen, hurried mothers, laughing students, no one stopped. Eyes glanced at her but quickly turned away, as if she were invisible. Victor froze in place. His breath caught, his chest suddenly heavy. He had faced ruthless competitors, crushing business deals worth millions, but this was different. This was pain he could not ignore. His polished shoes hesitated on the concrete sidewalk. He looked at her again, her tiny frame shaking with silent cries. Her teddy hung loosely in her grip as if even her strength to hold on was fading. Memories stirred in Victor's mind, sharp and painful. A little boy standing alone once, a childhood stripped of comfort. A young Victor waiting for someone to notice him, and no one ever did. His jaw tightened. The city moved around him, loud and alive, but he heard nothing except the quiet sobs of the girl on the bench. Each cry was a plea, though she hadn't spoken a word. Victor had always believed feelings were weaknesses, but right now his heart was louder than his mind. He saw one man walk past her, pretending to take a call. A woman in heels glanced at the girl, then turned away. A group of teenagers laughed as they strolled by, not even noticing her. Victor's pulse quickened. How could they ignore her? How could an entire world be so blind? And then the question came. What about him? Would he, Victor, the man with power to change lives, walk away too? Or would he stop? The little girl hiccuped, her sob breaking in the sunlight. Her eyes lifted for a second, watery blue, scanning faces that never looked back at her. When her gaze landed on Victor, his heart clenched. Her stare wasn't just sad. It was begging. It was the silent cry of a child asking, "Please don't leave me too." Victor inhaled slowly, his chest rising as if carrying the weight of a decision bigger than any deal he had ever signed. For years, he had lived for numbers, success, and control. But in that moment, he realized, sometimes the smallest voice could change everything. Victor took his first step toward the bench, then another. And with each step, he knew one truth. He couldn't and he wouldn't walk past her. Victor's shadow stretched across the sidewalk as he moved closer to the stone bench. The sound of his expensive shoes against the pavement seemed too loud, too sharp, in the hush that surrounded the crying child. The busy city noise faded into the background. All he could hear now was the faint hiccup of her sobs. He stopped just a step away, lowering himself carefully so he wouldn't tower over her. For a man who once intimidated boardrooms full of powerful investors, he now chose to kneel in front of a 5-year-old girl. His voice softened, surprising even himself. "Hey, sweetheart, why are you sitting here all alone?" The little girl froze. Her tiny hands gripped the teddy tighter, pulling it to her chest as if it could protect her. Her wide blue eyes darted up, shimmering with tears. She didn't answer. Instead, her lips trembled, and another tear slipped down her cheek. Victor felt his throat tighten. "It's okay," he said gently, trying again. "I won't hurt you, I just want to help. Can you tell me your name?" Her voice finally came so faint he almost didn't hear it. "Olivia," she whispered, the word breaking halfway through. Victor repeated it softly, like a promise. "Olivia, that's a beautiful name." The child sniffled, her eyes searching his face, cautious and scared. Her small legs dangled off the bench, swinging nervously, her shoes scuffed and dusty. Victor asked carefully, "Where's your mommy or daddy, Olivia?" The girl's lower lip quivered. She looked down at the teddy bear, stroking its worn fur. "Mommy told me to wait," Olivia murmured, her voice barely steady. "She said she'd come back." Her throat caught on the last word. "But she didn't." Victor's chest ached. The way she said it, so innocent, so trusting, made his heart twist painfully. He wanted to deny it, to tell her maybe her mother was just late, but her eyes told the truth. Her little fingers fidgeted with the teddy's torn ear, and then she asked something that pierced him. "Are you a bad man?" Victor froze. The question stunned him. He had been called ruthless, cold, heartless by rivals, but never this, never by a child. "No, Olivia," he said quietly, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I'm not a bad man, I promise." She blinked, her tears slowing for a moment as she studied him. It was as if her little heart was weighing his words, deciding whether to trust him or not. Victor held her gaze unflinching. For once, he didn't want to be the man of power. He wanted to be the man she could believe in. The silence stretched. "And then," Olivia whispered, "please, don't leave me here." The plea broke through every wall Victor had built around his heart. It wasn't just a request. It was a cry from a child who had already been left once and couldn't survive being left again. His chest burned with emotion, his pulse racing. Victor knew then that this moment was no accident. Fate had placed Olivia on that bench, and fate had placed him in front of her. He reached into his inner pocket, pulled out his expensive jacket, and gently draped it over her small shoulders. The fabric, far too big for her, swallowed her tiny frame, but Olivia clutched it tightly, her trembling easing just a little. "There," Victor said softly. "You're safe now." And in her tearful eyes, for the first time, there was a spark of something other than fear. A spark of fragile trust. Victor stayed crouched in front of Olivia, his expensive jacket sliding from her tiny shoulders as she hugged it close. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight, but her eyes, red, puffy, trembling, were clouded with fear. She was just 5, yet she carried the kind of sadness no child should know. Victor glanced around the busy street. People still moved past as though nothing unusual was happening. Some even looked briefly at the little girl wrapped in an oversized jacket, then turned away quickly, unwilling to get involved. The city was alive with sound, but to Victor it felt hollow. His mind raced. He had 2 choices: walk away like everyone else or take this girl into his care, even if just for now. Both choices carried weight. Both choices carried risk. His logical side whispered, "You don't know this child. Don't involve yourself." What if people misunderstood? What if the mother returned and accused him? What if helping her pulled him into trouble he didn't need? But his heart thundered louder. She's alone. She's scared. And if you leave, what will happen to her? Victor swallowed hard. He had fought ruthless competitors, stared down the faces of billion-dollar risks, but this felt far more dangerous. Because it wasn't about money, it was about a child's trust. He tried again gently. "Olivia, has your mommy been gone a long time?" The girl's voice was a whisper, broken and raw. "Forever. It feels forever." Her words stabbed at him. Forever. To a child, minutes could feel like hours. But her tear-stained face told him it really had been too long. Victor clenched his fists, then slowly released them. He had spent his life making decisions with cold calculation. But today, calculation meant nothing. Today, it was about conscience. He shifted closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Olivia, I know you're scared, but I promise I won't leave you." Her small eyes widened, as though she wanted desperately to believe him, but didn't know if she could. Her tiny hand trembled against the teddy bear. Victor hesitated, then slowly extended his hand toward her. It hovered in the air between them, a silent offering. The seconds ticked painfully slow. Would she take it? Would she trust him? Olivia's lips trembled. Her little body shook. Then, hesitantly, cautiously, her tiny fingers reached out and curled around his much larger hand. The touch was feather-light, fragile, but it sent a shiver through Victor. That small act was more binding than any contract he had ever signed. It was a silent agreement. A child had chosen to believe him, and in that moment he knew he couldn't betray that trust. Victor looked around one last time at the city that had ignored her. The sun beat down on the concrete, shadows sharp, but none of it mattered. This wasn't just a girl on a bench anymore. This was his responsibility now. The choice was made, and it was dangerous. Not for his reputation, not for his empire, but for his heart. Because for the first time in years, Victor felt something he thought he had lost. The need to protect. He gently squeezed her hand and said firmly, "Come with me, Olivia. I'll keep you safe." And though her voice was trembling, her reply carried hope.
Promise?
Victor nodded without hesitation. Promise. Victor guided Olivia gently toward his sleek black car parked near the curb. Her tiny hand rested inside his, fragile but clinging tightly as though letting go would mean being lost again. People walking by glanced at them, but Victor didn't care. He wasn't thinking about appearances anymore. He opened the passenger door and carefully helped Olivia inside. The seat looked far too big for her small frame, but she sat quietly, hugging her teddy bear like it was her shield. Victor buckled her in, his movements slow and gentle, almost protective in a way he didn't recognize in himself. Sliding into the driver's seat, he glanced sideways. Olivia's wide blue eyes were fixed on him, nervous, as though she wasn't sure if she had made the right choice. Victor gave her the smallest, reassuring smile. The car pulled away from the crowded street, leaving behind the bench that had nearly become her prison of fear. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and fragile. Then Olivia's voice, trembling but curious, broke it. "Are you really not a bad man?" Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It hurt that a 5-year-old even had to ask such a question. He turned slightly, his tone steady. "No, Olivia, I'm not a bad man. I would never hurt you." She studied him for a moment, then whispered, "Mommy always said, don't go with strangers." Victor nodded slowly, respecting her caution. "She's right. You should be careful. But sometimes, not every stranger is bad. Sometimes they just want to help." Her little brow furrowed as though she was thinking very hard. Then she clutched her teddy tighter and asked, "Why did you stop for me?" "Nobody else did." Victor swallowed. The truth was raw, even for him. "Because I know how it feels and to be left alone," he admitted quietly. The child tilted her head, confused, but before she could ask more, her stomach growled softly. She ducked her head in embarrassment. Victor's lips curved slightly. "How about we get you something to eat?" At a small family restaurant on the way to his mansion, he ordered warm soup and soft bread for Olivia. She ate slowly at first, watching him carefully, but soon hunger won over fear. Victor found himself just watching her. Every spoonful she lifted seemed like proof that he'd made the right choice. Back at his mansion, Olivia's awe was clear. The tall ceilings, shiny floors, and wide rooms were unlike anything she had ever seen. But instead of excitement, her first words were, "It's too big. I'll get lost." Victor's chest tightened. He knelt beside her again. "You won't get lost? I'll be here." Later, in the cozy warmth of the living room, Olivia curled on the couch with her teddy. Her eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion. Victor placed a soft blanket over her small frame. But just as sleep began to take her, she whispered into the quiet, "What if Mommy never comes back?" Victor froze, his throat tightening. Her words weren't just a child's worry. They carried the heavy fear of someone who already suspected the truth. For the first time in years, Victor felt helpless. He sat beside her, his large frame almost awkward in the role of comforter. Gently, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know what will happen yet," he admitted honestly. "But I do know this. You are safe here, Olivia. I will not leave you." Her little hand reached out, resting on top of his. That touch, small, trusting, fragile, felt like a vow between them. Within minutes, her breathing softened, steady in sleep. Victor leaned back, staring at the ceiling. his mind racing with questions he'd never asked himself before. Why did he care so much about this child? Why did he feel like protecting her mattered more than any deal, any empire, any fortune he had built? It was supposed to be just one night. But as Victor watched Olivia sleep peacefully for the first time in who knew how long, deep down he already knew. This was only the beginning. Victor sat on the bench beside Olivia, the teddy bear between them like a fragile bridge connecting two broken hearts. His sky-blue suit looked strangely out of place in the quiet park, but for the first time, he didn't care about appearances. What mattered was the little girl beside him, with tear stains on her cheeks and eyes that carried the weight of the world. "Do you know what a promise is, Olivia?" Victor asked softly. His voice, usually cold in boardrooms, now trembled with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. She hugged her teddy closer. "It's when you say something, and you really mean it." Victor nodded, his throat tightening. "Exactly, and I want to make you a promise." Olivia blinked, her lashes still wet. "What kind of promise?" "That you won't be alone anymore," he whispered, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not while I'm here." Her lips trembled. "But people always say that. Then they go away." The words hit him like a blade. He thought of his own childhood, empty hallways, a big house where laughter never lived, a father who cared only for business. He had built his empire to prove himself, but somewhere along the way, he had locked away his heart. Until now. "Olivia," Victor said, his eyes steady and sincere, "I am not going anywhere. I know what it feels like to sit on a bench and hope someone notices. I know what it feels like to be invisible." Her small hand reached out slowly, hesitantly, and rested on his. You were invisible too?" Victor's chest ached, but a small smile tugged at his lips. "Yes, and meeting you today, maybe that was God's way of making sure neither of us ever feels invisible again." The girl's tears slowed, and for the first time a faint smile curved on her lips. The teddy bear sat squished between them, but somehow it felt like a witness to a new bond being born. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I promise you will laugh again. You will feel safe again, and I'll be here until you believe it." Her tiny arms moved suddenly, wrapping around his chest in a desperate hug. Victor froze for a second, then gently pulled her closer, feeling the fragile weight of trust pressing against him. His sky-blue suit wrinkled, but it didn't matter. He was holding something more precious than anything his millions could buy. In that embrace, Victor felt walls he had built over decades begin to crumble. A man who once measured life in profit and contracts now realized the greatest investment he could ever make was in the heart of a child who needed love. The park around them was still busy with footsteps, voices, and rushing lives. But for Victor and Olivia, time slowed. The world had ignored her. He had chosen not to. And that choice was turning into a promise that would change both their lives forever. Victor walked slowly out of the park with Olivia's tiny hand wrapped firmly in his. The city around them buzzed with noise. Cars honked, strangers hurried past, people stared at their phones. But Victor noticed something different now. The world looked brighter, warmer, as if holding Olivia's hand had changed the very air he breathed. She skipped lightly beside him, clutching her teddy with its missing eye. For the first time since he saw her on that lonely bench, her face wasn't clouded with sadness. A small smile danced on her lips, timid but real, and it made Victor's chest swell with a feeling he had never known before. "Victor?" she whispered. "Yes, Olivia? Does this mean I'm not alone anymore?" Her voice was fragile, the kind that could shatter hearts if the answer wasn't right. Victor stopped walking. He bent down so his eyes were level with hers, his sky-blue suit creasing as his knees touched the ground. His gaze softened. No trace of the CEO who ruled boardrooms remained. "No, sweetheart," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You'll never be alone again, not as long as I live." Her eyes sparkled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. She threw her little arms around his neck, hugging him with all the strength her small body could give. Victor closed his eyes, holding her tightly, feeling the walls inside his soul collapse. A lifetime of loneliness, success without joy, and victories without meaning, all of it melted in the warmth of that hug. As people walked by, some glanced at the sight. A powerful man in a perfect sky-blue suit, kneeling on the sidewalk, holding a little girl in his arms. Most didn't stop, but a few did. They whispered to each other, their expressions softening. For once, they weren't seeing a CEO or a millionaire. They were seeing something far greater, a man who remembered how to love, and a child who found a home in a stranger's heart. Victor stood again, taking Olivia's hand in his. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you something to eat. How do you feel about pancakes?" Her laughter rang out, light and sweet, like bells in the distance. "I love pancakes," she giggled, and her joy felt like music filling the streets. For Victor, that moment was more valuable than all the contracts he had signed, more precious than any fortune he had earned. He realized wealth meant nothing if it wasn't used to bring light into someone else's life. And for the people who had walked past Olivia earlier, pretending not to see her tears, the image of Victor kneeling to comfort her remained etched in their minds. Some went home that evening thinking about the children they had ignored, the neighbors they had overlooked, the kindness they had forgotten to give. Victor's single act of compassion sent ripples across the city, a reminder that love, care, and humanity were worth more than gold. That night, as Olivia sat beside him at the dinner table, eating pancakes with sticky syrup and smiling shyly, Victor silently promised himself something deeper than words. He would be her safe place. He would make sure her laughter never faded again. And for the first time in years, Victor's own heart felt alive. He had built empires of glass and steel, but today, with a child's hand in his, he had built something far greater: hope. The lesson was clear, not just for him, but for everyone. No child should ever be invisible. No soul should ever be left alone. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change two lives forever.